Welcome to the 4 Bars Podcast. I'm Ken Leith.
And I'm Patti Leith. We are your hosts for some compelling dialogue, encouraging our listeners to strengthen their connections
And build strong communities, lifting each other up and connecting in ways that matter.
We named the podcast 4 Bars as a reference to how hard we work to find a 4 Bars connection on our devices.
And we wondered what could happen with relationships if we worked as hard at connecting.
Let's find out.
Hi, welcome back to 4 Bars. We're glad to have you. I'm one of your hosts, Ken Leith, and with me I have...
I'm Patti Leith, a co-host, and we are doing this episode on our own. It's only the 4th one we've done in this way. We're kind of celebrating a year of doing these podcasts, so that's kind of a cool milestone. We're seeing our viewership grow, we're seeing our listeners grow, and we're going to encourage you to share this podcast with at least one other person, and think about following and subscribing as you do. We are going to spend a little bit of time continuing our dialogue about collaboration because we think that collaboration is a really big part of what builds community. And in today's episode, we're going to explore a key element inside of collaboration, and that is influence. So previously, we have spent a little time telling you about our collaboration tool. And I think that we mentioned in episode 13 that tool highlights the differences in 3 different areas. So I'm going to revisit those. And if you're interested, go back and check out episode 13 and episode 19. In episode 13, we talked about the fact that when we are working or processing things in our personal environment, we have a tendency to want a certain level of detail. And when that certain level of detail is different from the person we're working with, married to, living with, corresponding with, we sometimes have some friction. This is a predominant part of any collaborative effort, is to recognize this difference and to move ahead. We call that a changing leaf. That's a big picture person who wants to think about the outcomes and then follow up with the details. Or an evergreen. That's a detail-oriented person who wants to start with the details and work up to the outcome. We approach work differently, and yet both of our approaches are very necessary for the work to be good. And again, this is not just at work, it's also at home and at church and at our civic groups. In episode 19, we took a look at how we process information. Ken, you want to talk about that?
Yes. So when we think about processing information, how do we take something from an idea to a reality? How do we move it forward, advance it? Some people think about it as kind of going from 0 to 60. So when we think about that information that we process, we do that either internally, where we like to think it through. We want to consider all the variables internally, think it through, do a little research if we want, but we do that alone, generally speaking. And we feel most comfortable doing that. Again, it's not that we can't verbalize it, it's just that we feel more comfortable that way. The flip side of that is someone who wants to do it externally. So if you think about someone who's maybe walking around the office, who talks to people periodically, and they do that, that might be someone who's working through a project or a challenge that they're having. And each time they are speaking to someone, they're gathering another piece of data. They are grabbing a piece of the puzzle to help them solve it. So conversely, to the person who did it internally, they are going to engage people, and they're getting moved towards their solution by being able to have that dialogue. Again, neither is right or wrong. Both can be effective. Sometimes there are some opportunities where, or not opportunities, I'll say, sometimes it can be, to your term, friction that occurs.
Yeah.
Because if I'm someone who's thinking about it and just talking to people, thinking about it internally, then what can happen there is other people might not know that I'm spending time thinking about that. I'm connected to something maybe the team is working on. So they may wonder why I'm involved in a meeting.
Yeah.
Conversely, if I'm internal processor and I'm working with someone who's external processor, and they come by, they tell me one day, I'm talking to them, they take something and then they go away, I might think that, oh, we've landed on a solution, but they're still collecting pieces of the puzzle. So I might judge them a little bit. It's like, are they flighty? Are they someone who can't make a decision? Because I thought we made a decision. In essence, it's just sometimes the communication. In that scenario, they say, I'm just thinking about it or working through it. I'm not yet complete on that. Let me finish that and I'll come back to you.
Yeah.
And so, again, just another method behavior. There's not a right or wrong to this, and that's the beauty of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm going to point out that in the description Ken just gave of what we covered in episode 19, and the description I gave, you can see that Ken is more detail oriented than I am. He shared a little more, but you can learn a lot about both of these characteristics and how they play out in our relationships if you look back on the previous episodes.
Absolutely. And if you do, the other thing is that the tool we're talking about is our interface methods tool. So it's one that's been around for many years now, and many iterations of that. So when customers use it, they use it. I'm just going to talk about that for a second. They use it anywhere from bringing a group together to work on strategy. Maybe it's their executive team, or maybe it's groups within their organization. And they try to get teams that have people who do it differently. Because think about it, if it's all people who are process oriented, those linear thinkers, then they're going to do a really great job of creating the process and making sure the detail's there. But they may have a challenge with pushing the ideation and the innovation of it. So they may have, their risk there may be losing market share because they're not innovative. On the other side of that is those people who are thinking about things and working through it on the team, who are big picture thinkers. They are really good at pushing us the envelope and asking why can't we do something different and more, which is great. But if they are not supported by those other thinkers, they may not have the process that's really accurate, that's detailed enough for people to go execute. So then you could lose market share and opportunities there. But together, working together, creates really, really powerful force and really productive work.
Yeah. So today we're going to tackle influence and collaboration. And there is one element that's measured on the interface methods tool that that tells us what our preference is when we're influencing and collaborating. The beautiful thing about the interface methods tool is it's behavioral. So when I spot a difference, I can do three things. I can not judge, and I can willfully adapt, and then in doing so, I can connect better with the person that I'm talking with. That's different from a personality tool, which is harder to change, right? Indeed. So our research showed that there were these three things that really mattered when people were communicating, and when we're different, our other choice is to judge and to disconnect, right? So I guess we really have 5 choices. But really what you want to do is you want to recognize the difference, not judge that difference, and then plan a good, strong connection for that person. So we'll talk today about one that really is you have to recognize and it's very easy to recognize, but it's important to be really intentional about your adaptation, and that's influence and collaboration. Influence is something that is necessary from everything in your life, from talking to your kids, trying to convince your husband you need to get another puppy, which, by the way, maybe I'm not a good person to talk about influence because I've not been able to convince him of that, but I'm continuing to work on it. So check back with me on that one. To, trying to make sure that the contractor working on your home or your landlord who's supposed to fix something in your living space is doing what you need for them to do. It's also a skill that is heavily utilized in our civic exchanges and in our workspace. And when we do it differently, we have a tendency to judge the other person. So I'm going to tell you that those 2 methods on a continuum between really strong and somewhere in the middle and then really strong again are very direct and very cautious. And we can kind of be somewhere in the middle. But the reality of it is that when I am a direct influencer, my language, the words that I choose, the things that come into my head and then quickly get moved out into the world by my mouth are different from somebody who is more cautious. The cautious person's language, again, what comes into their head and what they say without thinking about it, is different. And when we use these different languages, we have a hard time hearing the other person. So direct and cautious are very easy to spot because it's, a direct person is pretty upfront, pretty succinct, pretty cut and dry. And a cautious person is going to be more diplomatic, a little bit more there's more qualifying words in the way that they say it. But what happens is when I say my direct thing to a cautious person, it's more than what I mean it to be. And sometimes that will cause them to check out. And if a cautious person says their cautious thing to me, I might not hear it as what they mean. I might only hear it as a suggestion. And so
Yes.
exploring this dynamic in your personal and your professional lives and in your community work that you're a part of is critical to really kind of say, okay, how do I communicate and why? But recognize that I have the ability to spot that your preference is different and I can adapt.
Yes.
So you want to share a couple of stories about this difference?
Yeah. And
we've seen it a lot and
it
lots
plays
of
out every day in everyday life. And I will say that
you can look for it in TV shows. Like you totally can look for it in TV shows.
Agreed 100% on that too. We've seen a lot of that.
And if it's well written, it really scripts out that difference. So.
Yes. So yes, I will say that when you think about these two differences here, it is something where we can really easily start to, once we identify our method and understand that how people who are different utilize their ability to influence, then we can adapt our message point for them. And that's one of the key things before we in conversation of stories about those. Is that's a big deal for that one. The other thing about the cautious and direct difference, we'll talk a little bit today about what can you do to be able to adapt. What does adaptation look like when you're working with someone else? So that if you know you're working with someone who's different in this area, you can actually prep your interface for that meeting with them in order to have the best opportunity to influence them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So when a cautious person, and you're more cautious than I am, and anybody who knows us knows this to be true. I'm going to be more direct. We both have moved a little bit towards the middle in being married to each other for almost 20 years. In the years that we've been together, right? I think it was much more substantially different 10 years ago or even 20. But the cautious person will choose words that have more diplomacy, and that usually includes some qualifying words like might, maybe, possibly, think about, could, instead of should, do, now. Right? So the direct person is going to say, don't do that. And the cautious person is going to say, you might want to think about possibly considering not doing that. And that's great. If a cautious person says that to a cautious person, what they mean, which is don't do it, is going to come across to a cautious person because they're speaking the same language. They use qualifying words to temper around what it is that they're saying, and they're speaking the same language. But if that cautious person says that might want to consider possibly to a direct person, the direct person kind of shoos it away like a fruit fly and says, no, that's just a suggestion. Hold my beer, watch this. I'm going to do it anyway, right? So the language is not the same. When the direct person says to the cautious person, don't do that, it feels a little offensive, a little too strong, a little bit like, what do you mean? And in fact, if they say that to a direct person, because they speak the same language, it won't feel that way. When that direct person makes a really succinct statement, the cautious person reads it the way they would make that statement if they were in fact on their third try, right? I'm frustrated. So when I say to Ken, no, don't do that, he wouldn't say it that way to me until he had tried a few other ways to say it, right? And so what comes across is that, gee, for her to say it that way, she's got to be really frustrated when I am not at all, right? Yeah. And I don't mean it in a way that is supposed to be overbearing. I don't mean it in any different way than you would mean it if you said you might want to consider holding off on that, right? Yeah. We were talking today about my social media, and I was sharing something that I had read, and he said, you might want to think about dialing back that, because what I had read was somewhat disturbing, as a lot of it is today. And what I heard from him was a suggestion. And what you meant was, don't be reading that stuff, right?
Basically, yes.
And he's right, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Again, I think that as we think about these differences, it is something that as we get better with it and we actually know someone else's their differences and where they are different from us, it's something also that tempers some of that a bit friction you might have there, or that thinking of, oh, they're coming on, they're saying it very succinctly, so they're upset. The more you know that, and I'll give you an example. My last CEO that I reported to in corporate America before we started working together, he was a very direct person. And at first it was like, wow, he is very, very direct. And when our relationship was fine, but I kind of took some of his stuff as everything he would say was, I need to go, make sure I do it now. And I had to address it at a higher level of urgency. And I didn't necessarily need to do that, but we organically, through our working together, started to identify this difference in the way that that played out. And it was one that sometimes he would actually, in his correspondence, show he'd come off very direct in his correspondence, which then, especially if someone he was writing to was cautious, that could lead them to down a path of, wow, is he just mad? Or
Right.
what's the real point?
Is he mad? That's what, yes.
Yeah. So
What level of frustration exists
exactly
for him to say it that way? And the answer is probably none.
No, he was just a very direct person, but he was also someone who had a lot of energy.
Yeah.
And so he would sometimes write the same way, and it would come out where, again, people could be confused organically somehow, and I can't even remember how it happened. There was something he was writing, he asked me about it, and I gave him a little bit of feedback that he wanted on that. And basically what I did was I helped temper it to make sure that it was factual, which is what direct people want to do. They want to give the facts and be done with that. They want the next thing often. And so he was able to then take that same correspondence, temper it a little bit, not necessarily use cautious words, but remove some words that maybe were a little bit, oh, okay, that's maybe too succinct. And what he found is that the responses he started getting to his email were a little bit clearer, the responses, because they were reading it a little bit differently based upon that. So that's one of the ways that having two people who are different work together, even in that scenario, has value to it, because he was able to kind of shift out the way that he communicated, and he picked up on that himself. And
he asked for your help sometimes to help pare it down.
Pare it down, but not pare it down enough to where people didn't understand the points that he wanted to make.
Right. And by pare it down, what I mean is amp down the volume of it. But really that was by adding a little bit more diplomatic words.
Sometimes add, sometimes remove.
Sometimes remove. That's funny. That's funny. Now, our son kind of summed up the difference between Ken and I when we were teaching him to drive. He also is cautious and much preferred Ken's mentorship in that area than mine. And I said, well, honey, why? And by the way, he's grown now, so he's not going to love that I'm telling this story. I'm like, why? And he goes, well, Mom, when you want me to slow down, you go, whoa, whoa, whoa. And when Ken wants me to slow down, he says, give me a little break.
Yes. And by doing that...
and we mean the same thing. It's slow down.
and I will say that my interaction, the way I was able to do that with him, was having experienced it with Nicole, my daughter, before that. And I was not saying, give me a little break. So it was one of those learned things. I was like, okay, because she's, at the time, she's even more cautious than me. Now she's more direct than I am today.
Yeah, that urgency is something that situation brings on. So, and really remember that this is a preference. We can change it if we want to, but it's how we prefer it. And because we prefer it, it is harder to change how we hear it. So I can know that Ken is cautious, and if I'm wanting to influence him in some way, I can choose my words in ways that are not quite as demanding, right? But I also know that he's cautious, and I can't always hear his cautious words in the way that I need to adapt them to translate them to my language, right? So we have a harder time hearing that, which is one of the reasons that adaptation is really important. And I've had leaders, particularly direct leaders, who say, shouldn't they meet me halfway? Like, can't I do a little of it? And yes, if you have dialogue about it, the answer would be yes. But But the reality of it is, it's much harder to change how we hear it than it is to change how we say it. So the deliverer of the message does bear a little bit more responsibility to consider how to package it.
Yeah, and preparation
Preparation
is a
on
big
that's
part of
really
that.
important.
With anything, and I had this conversation with one of the folks who was a coach client the other day, and the first part of being able to utilize any tool, in this case with interface methods, is once you learn it, is the willingness to adapt. Because if I'm willing to adapt, then the next parts become much easier.
Which we believe is a critical life skill all the way around, and a primary ingredient in an organization's ability to grow, right?
Absolutely. Teamwork, collaboration, they take adaptation.
Yeah, they take adaptation.
But the good news is there too, is that once people also know that I'm willing to adapt, whether I'm cautious or direct, they feel I'm a little bit more open.
Yes,
And
that's
so
a
that's
good point.
more approachable.
Yeah, yeah.
And you mentioned earlier, a couple of stories, and so I'll share one here. Maybe share a few different stories. We were with a client at an offsite. They wanted to take them offsite. So great offsite. We were in Breckenridge, Colorado. So if anyone who's ever been there, it's a beautiful place. And we were helping them to reset their strategic vision for the next 5 years. And so they were planning on how they were going to move forward, how they were going to grow. And they took all of their executive level out there. And I think we had about 20 people or so. And it was a very, very productive meeting. But one of the things they did was unique. They have customers all over the country and in other countries also. Was they did some offsites from our offsite, where they went and saw some of their customers directly. They took the opportunity, they were in those regions, to see people they don't see as often. So they would pair up, or maybe 3 or 4 people, and go. And so in this one car, there was a SVP, a senior vice president, and a VP who reported to him. And as they were driving to a customer site, the VP, who was in the back seat, made a sound like, as she told that, like, ugh, or something like that. But obviously that piqued the interest of everyone else in the car. It's like, what's going on? And she had received a text from a customer, and it was a text she felt was unfair. She felt the information was not accurate. And so she wanted to send a text back in return. The SVP, who I will share, was a cautious person, is a cautious person still.
They actually told this story at the workshop.
Yes.
As an example.
Yes.
Of the language.
Yes. The SVP, he, after asking her what it is, she read the information to him. And so his response was, you may want to consider waiting and not send that text right now. So he has put it out there. In his mind, he's saying, because he's cautious, don't do it, hold off, give it a day, and then go ahead and send something so that you feel a little bit clearer. She heard, may want to consider holding off on that. That was something that she took, as Patti indicated earlier, can happen. She took that as a suggestion, giving her the ability to make a choice, yes or no. Her choice was, yes, I do want to send this out because I am not happy about what I received. And this is the way she told it. And she, after typing it out and sending it, quickly gets another response back. And as they started to, again, talk about that, they also realized now they have extra work to do, which is to go and address this issue with the customer directly, so there's no misunderstanding, and not have that customer concerned about a email that was too direct for that person to see, because this person in the rear, the VP, was a very strong direct person. As Patti said too, they themselves realized what happened through that transaction. They had actually taken the interface tool, but just in that moment, really didn't think it through when she did it, because she's a cautious or direct person. She wanted to go ahead and do it. And they did start sharing this. So in their team meetings, so we actually would bring them in some of the training classes we would do, and they would tell that information to their teams, to other teams, in a way that, being, they coming from the first person, direct person, and the cautious person, it allowed them to really feel what they felt, because they could give a little bit more of the how I was feeling to it.
Yeah, and what I loved about the way they told that story is that at the end, she would say, so I went back into him, my SVP, and said, why didn't you tell me not to send this? And he said, I did.
Mhm.
And in that moment, everybody really understood. Yes, this language is different, and sometimes I can't hear it the way that you mean it if I'm different from you,
Yes.
right? But if you know that you're different from me, let's think about repackaging and reconnecting that message.
Yeah. And the other part is with most things is if I'm unsure and I'm communicating with someone and I think that, let's say it's coming from Patty, who is more direct, my option and my first option is, can you restate that for me? Because here's what I heard. Or I got that there may be something that might be upset about or something that's really, really urgent. I just want to make sure I understand what you're communicating to me so you know how to address it, how to take it, and not go down a rabbit hole if you're cautious, because I've been there before, where you start worrying about something else other than really, truly what the message was and what was being asked to go do.
Yeah. One of the funnier demonstrations of this difference, Ken and I were traveling and we had Siri on, and Siri can be kind of persistent when you get off track, like if you stop to go to the bathroom. And Siri's telling us to turn around and make a U-turn, and we're parking to get out and take a break. And it was quite annoying. And remember that I'm direct and Ken is cautious. In the exact same moment, I say, Siri, shut up. And he says, oh, Siri, chill.
Yes.
There's the difference between the direct and the cautious. Mm-hmm. So if you've got a person in your life more direct or more cautious than you, whether that's at work, whether it's your kid or your significant other or your pastor or your, the person that runs the nonprofit that you're volunteering at, this. And so then that adaptation is where the skill set comes in. Influence means I can spot it, and I can change the way that I present my message in a way that is going to resonate more with you.
Yes.
And you don't have to get it right the first time. If you say your thing in the language that doesn't resonate, you'll know it. You'll know it by the look on their face. And you can say, let me restate that. 'Cause I don't think that came out the way that I meant for it to come out.
Yes. Body language, facial expressions tell a lot as to when we're speaking to someone, whether or not they actually got what I was trying to communicate to them, or maybe somehow my communication didn't connect with them.
Yeah.
So sometimes also looking for not just the verbal responses, but the nonverbal responses.
So instead of me saying, honey, we need another puppy, because I really think that we do, it might be a better approach if I take you to the dog park with the dog and you see how much fun she has with other dogs. And I'm like, oh, look how great that community is for her. That would be a better way to...
Being more direct, I don't think it'll have an impact.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, let me restate that.
So
it won't have an impact.
You're negating my ability to be an authority on influence.
Well, I just threw in a cautious piece in that.
Oh, funny.
With respect to that. So when I said, I don't think it'll have an impact. No, I should say
it will not have an impact. He's pretty adamant that we're a one dog family, and I would have 10 more if I could. So
yes,
yeah.
Our dog is very direct.
She's she's pretty spoiled.
We don't need two direct dogs in the house.
Yeah.
No, but part of all of this is when you are learning it, and this comes from a lot of our clients and customers who have utilized it over the years, who still utilize it. It is the willingness just to also have fun with this. As with anything we're learning, we will try it out. It may not fit perfectly the first time. We may go, oh, how does this work for me? We find that it gets picked up very, very quickly, often within the first week or two, the language. And then once we have that language down and we start to observe others, and what those behaviors are, then we can really utilize that. Again, go back to so I can have better influence. I can have better clarity, whether it is, again, in our personal lives, in our business life, or out in our communities, because these things are not tied to one area of our lives. It plays out every day in all areas of our lives.
Every conversation that we have. And, we go back to why we call this 4 bars. We go to so much effort to find the 4 bars that if we put some thought and energy into the exchange, once we get that connection, what could we accomplish, right?
Absolutely.
So this part is something Ken and I are very passionate about because we've seen it, we've lived it, we've worked together. We've also learned to adapt, and we know when we haven't, and we're pretty honest and upfront about that. So that's been really healthy for us. But check it out if you're interested. Interfacemethods.com is where you'll find more information about it, and revisit episode 13 and episode 19. Thanks for being with us today. It's great to have the listeners and the viewers, and please feel free to share your thoughts with us through our 4barspodcast.com about how we can make this a better podcast for you. We have some amazing things planned for our next year, and we can't wait to tell you about them. But you'll have to tune into the next episode to hear about that.
Yes. And if you get the opportunity, also like and follow us on social media. We appreciate that.
Yeah.
And as Patti said, we look forward to our next time with you. Hope you have a great week.
The 4 Bars podcast has been brought to you by Edges Inc., a growth advisory firm based in Bentonville, Arkansas. I founded the company in 2001.
Edges promotes growth of people, companies, and ideas. Our team collaboration tool called Interface Methods is a basis for teams to work together more collaboratively, understand each other, and accept differences and address challenges together.
We also started a nonprofit called Unform Your Bias. We teach kids and their adult influencers how to utilize storytelling as a means to reduce bias in the world. We hope you'll check us out, subscribe to our podcast, and look at our websites.